Hey guys, Alex Garrett here for another wisdom talk. It was so cool to talk with John Martin the other day about Taoism, and today a few God signs in real life. Really, when you feel his wisdom, you really feel it. Meaning, there's just an instinct that you're called to go someplace, any place, and in that moment, you're like, when you find out why, like God meant for me to be in that moment. So on this Sunday, March 13th, what do I mean by that? Well, I wanted to make a bank transfer, right? I mean, it's a regular everyday thing. And I went to my TD Bank and I was rolling to it. I rollerblade on one leg in New York City. I was rolling to it, feeling like I was called to be at this ATM in this very moment. And when you realize that you're called to be in that moment, it hits you like a ton of bricks. Saw a guy leaving the ATM, but I noticed a 20 on the floor. And at first I'm like, that's random, a random 20 on the floor. But then, all of a sudden, all of a sudden, I turn around and say, hey, you dropped a 20 here. Guy gave me the biggest hug in the world. And after I made my transfer, I had this big ass grin because, well, let's face it, there was a calling there to go and be in that moment where the guy dropped a 20. I'm not saying someone else wouldn't have done it, but I'm saying, how is it I'm entering the ATM as he's leaving the ATM, and how is it I see the 20 and I'm like, hey, you dropped a 20, I think, just before he totally left the building. See, that's where God's calling is there, and that's how you know He's walking with you when you're in those moments, in the real life moments of, wow, did that just happen? Did that just happen where the guy dropped a 20 on the way to the ATM as I'm rollerblading in there? Did that just happen? And I was bewildered at first, but then I said, well, guess what? Let's let's pick this 20 up and give it to this guy. And he's like, thank you, bro. Gave him the biggest hug. And so I'm telling this story because it's a wow moment on a Sunday, the Lord's Day. It's a wow moment. And I don't know if you want to join in quickly, but you can to join in. But have you had those wow moments of, is this really happeningness? Am I called to this specific spot for a specific reason? Because I think we're all right place, right time minded folks. I think we're all everything happens for a reason minded folks here at Wisdom. By the way, it was the app of the day, this app of the day, just a few days ago, and that means the momentum's carrying for the Wisdom app. But his wisdom runs through the body. Because when you have an instinct and you're called to go someplace, you follow that. You follow that. Because it might just be a regular transfer, a bank transfer, that could turn into a bigger moment and realize, wow, is this why I was meant to be here right now? For those joining, I'm Alex Garrett. Thanks for joining me. I'm on Wisdom every few days, it feels like, and I do happen to podcast also at Alex Garrett Podcasting, which you can follow on Instagram, Alex G Podcast, and also Alex G NYC1 on Instagram, Twitter, and yes, I do TikTok. So you can follow me there. Shout out, give me a shout out if you're listening on the Wisdom app. I'd love to know if people are following this journey beyond just these talks. And I think the other talks are online as well. I've got about 4 of them right now. So thanks for joining this talk. I love it. I love seeing the numbers increase as I discuss with you my experience today. Let me reset the scene for those just joining. I rollerbladed to the TD Bank. Just a regular roll to do some banking. And I felt really called to do it. And we don't know why we're felt called to be at a place until it actually happens. Well, I saw $20 on the floor, and a guy was leaving the ATM just as I saw that $20. I turned to him and said, "Hey, look, you dropped this," and I gave him the 20. And I'm like, all right, on a regular Sunday at a regular bank, I had a moment that was called by him, by God, to be there at the right time. I feel that. Anyway, I feel that on a spiritual level, not so much on the religious level, because God works spiritually within us. And those instincts you have, those are his spiritual calls to you to act when you have that instinct. Like, I'm meant to be going to this place right now. We don't know why, but it'll find itself out. And I feel like 100% of the time it does. So follow that lead. Follow his calling. Follow what's going through your veins at any moment, because it could be a eye opener. Like, how is it I'm rollerblading into this TD Bank? And how is it a guy's coming out from the ATM and all of a sudden you put you connect the dots and you're like, holy crap, I might have just helped this guy get $20 that he dropped. Because who else would notice that? I mean, maybe others would. And also, who else would actually give him the money in that moment? I feel like people might, but I put the 2 and 2 together, and I'm like, well, this is a God sign that I was meant to do this regular banking and turn it into an experience, and then talk about it with you on Spreaker, on Wisdom, on Apple Podcasts as well, because I do simulcast this on my other platforms as well. Just a heads up there. Alex G Podcast on Twitter, Alex G NYC1 on Twitter. And I love that when you tag Join Wisdom, they respond. They actually retweet you in their social media, which is pretty cool. You have to tag them on Facebook. I haven't really found them on Facebook yet, but yeah. Amongst all the things going on in the world, I mean, I'm a sports guy, so Tom Brady unretiring. Amongst all the things going on with the NCAA tournament, March Madness, the 6th round of 68 teams have been selected. But today, on a very local level, like personal experience level, God showed me the way. And then you realize why he did and how and why it's important to follow an instinct you have. Because it might be his calling you to do something, to move things along for others that may need a little help. And I think the guy that dropped to 20, very appreciative, but he might have been very, very, very fortunate today. I know I was. I felt very encouraged by just putting the dots together and giving him his 20 on the floor. By the way, these talks are archived, so if you want a little context, you can listen back in the archive after this talk is done. But what about you? Any God's wisdom has it touched you today or this week at all that you want to share? You could join me for a bit. I got an open mic. I got a few minutes to talk. I'd love to hear from people. I love doing interviews. I do. I love doing interviews. Ooh, interesting. All right, I've got a guest coming on in 3, 2, 1. Larry, how are you, man?
I'm good. How you doing, Alex?
I see that God is actually part of your podcasting platform. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you need a little backup of my story today, and maybe you can touch on it. But
Mhm.
basically, it's amazing. I was called to go to this. I went to this TD bank, right, to do a regular bank transaction, and all of a sudden, I saw a guy drop a $20 bill as he's leaving the ATM, and I picked it up for him right then and there. And I said, "Well, this was God calling me to be there." So, do you find that He calls you to be in certain places at the right time? Do you have that
Yeah.
meant to be right place, right time, thanks to Him
Y-
vibe?
Yes.
You
I
want to share?
Sure. I'll give you an example. Um, at work, um, and in movement. Let's just say in movement. I could be someone walking down the street and I would hear make a left. Like, what? That's not the way I'm supposed to go. Make a left. Lord, I'm supposed to walk straight. Make a left. I'll make the left. Start praying. Da, 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 da. Lo and behold, on my way there, something that happened. It could be an accident. A kid could fall off the bike. Somebody could be dropping something. I'll be there to pick it up and hand it to them. At work, it'd be me breaking up a fight between kids or catch the kids right before some they're.
Larry, what do you do for work? Give us a little context of what you do for work.
I'm in education. I'm a football coach, basketball coach, strength and conditioning coach as well, and I'm also a teacher's assistant in New York City, Department of Education.
Very cool. Well, I know we're kind of getting breath of fresh airs in our city school system right now because
Yeah.
these mandates have been lifted, but that's not the topic of conversation. So you feel that God works in the workplace for you.
Hmm?
The education system is kind of on the outset. It looks like they reject God, but do you feel like individuals are bringing God into the workplace? I don't know if you want to weigh in on that or not.
I'm not going to say they're bringing God into the workplace. Um, are they walking with Him into the workplace? Yes. It something that I would say colleagues and people, you know, other coaches, other teachers, or whatever, are they broadcasting and leading with God first? No, because quote unquote it's taboo for them to do it. Um, but they're with them. There are
Yeah.
believers moving around, and you kind of find out who each other is when in the conversation. Oh, and it becomes a one on one conversation. It's not something
Sure.
where, and I understand it. You don't want someone preaching to you at work when you're trying to work. I can kind of get it, but you do want to be able to have parameters. You want to have barriers, right? You want to be able to make sure that you're not leading children or leading your colleagues down the wrong way with your own desires. So there has to be a spiritual compass guiding you. So with that said, I can see colleagues and we'll have our conversations on the side, one on one, and you'll find out there's a lot more people who do believe in God that don't, but the believers have been taught to be silent.
Hmm.
So
Do you find this app is good for believers to speak out? I feel like wisdom is such a wide open net that people can be preaching Him and talking about His ways on this app.
what is amazing is 3 years ago, about this question, 3 years ago, I made a promise to God because He kind of revealed to me spiritually, like I was able to feel what people were going to go through COVID. Like I can't explain it to you. It was around 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm up praying, and this is like around March 15th, 2019. This is right after they started locking the city down. 3 days later, so I'm in prayer in the morning, and He showed it to me, and I was so, the grief and the weight of it. I'm 200 at the time. I was 265 pounds, 6'2", former football player. I dropped to my knees. I had no strength, weeping with snot coming out of my nose and spit falling out of my face, right out of my mouth. It allowed me to see and to feel what they might be going through. And to further answer your question, it was a need. It became a need to be able to do God's will. That was my promise for him. That if you're able, Lord, to help me, help others, because I know we're gonna all of us are gonna be going through some traumatic times over these next few years. Um,
Hmm.
Allow me to be a vessel to help your people, and in doing so, and blessing me with this company, I'll give you glory wherever I can. So before I even really start talking about my business and what it does, I'll catch myself mid sentence somewhere within the first 5 or 10 sentences and be like, "Excuse me," even no matter who it is, and I'll explain it to him like, "Listen, when I started this, this is the scenario, and I made him a promise, and that I would give him glory. So this didn't just come from me. This is something downloaded, and I've found more people to be receptive to that approach than rejective. I looked at the email I had received, invited me to Wisdom, because I have a podcast too. It's called Cleverly Said, Cleverly Spoken. Um, and the ironic thing about me starting the podcast, this is how amazing God is, and it the light bulb just went off in my head as I'm about to explain this to you. When I started the podcast, I started with two other people who were with me at the. They weren't with me at the start of the company, but they came along about a year and a half later, as I started like really revamping and getting into the technical sides and the paperwork side of me executing the business plan. So when we started the podcast, it wasn't supposed to be about God. It was just going to be about all sports. Cool.
Sure.
We did, we wrote 16 to 20 episodes, and we scripted about 20 episodes, and we pre-recorded on Zoom maybe about 7 to 8, about six. One of the members fell off, became a free agent, and then myself and another gentleman did about 16. We finished 8 and 8 with two people. Short story longer, both of us, I get it separated and become in the process of going through a divorce. Unfortunately, my boy winds up going through a breakup the same month last month. Excuse me, January last year, right? Since then, up until August, I spend 1 year, excuse me, yeah, I spend exactly 1 year asking almost 100 people to join the
Hmm.
podcast, and I need help. Would you do it? Everybody's like, yeah, 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 yeah. I'm having meetings upon meetings, and nobody's there to record. Nobody's there to show up. And in every meeting, I always say, listen, the podcast, we're not going to talk about God. We're not going to talk about religion. You know what wound up happening? We're not going to talk about religion. We could talk about God, but we're not going into religion. We're not going into this. Because you're going to run into a fanatic, and that could just cause World War III. Excuse me.
Huh.
That can just cause World War 90, right? And
Sure.
you don't know where the fanatic will take their emotions based upon what you say is in writing or not, or just your perception of things. So let's just stay away from that and keep it on this. No one showed up. I never used any of them. And it became me and the microphone and God. And almost every real episode, I wound up
Larry, I feel
God.
like people should tune in, and we got about 90 seconds. So where can people
Yeah.
find your podcast? I'm
You
curious
can
now.
find me my podcast. I'm on Amazon. The most popular one is on Amazon Music. Cleverly Said, Cleverly Spoken. You can find me on Google. Best way to do it is just a Google search. I'm on Buzzsprout. I'm on most almost all platforms. And
Very cool. Well, I'm gonna definitely follow you. Are you on Twitter also?
yes, I'm on Twitter.
Is it cleverly said, cleverly spoken, or what is your Twitter?
Hold on. Daggone it. We got about 90 seconds. Give me 32 seconds, okay?
All
I'm
right.
pulling it up right now because I changed the name. I do have to make the brand straight across because I use Twitter mostly for my own. My Twitter head is Sports Ed LLC. It's underneath my company.
Well, we got to do another wisdom or even just a regular podcast about how God
Sure.
and sports go hand in hand. Because as a frontliner in the sports world, I feel like you see that. But Larry, few seconds remaining. Thanks so much for joining, and I feel like he's touched you, and thanks for sharing your experience with me tonight on wisdom.
Thank you very much for bringing me to the mic, and for inviting me on. I greatly appreciate you. Continue doing the great work, Alex. We need some more help and more voice.
And with that, he's the computer timed him out. But Larry Thomas, thanks for joining me. Cleverly said, cleverly spoken, and he can also be found on this app as well. And of course, listen back to this talk. Very, very cool. First guest ever on my wisdom talk. And Larry, thanks so much for joining. What about anybody else? While I have the mic open, want to talk about this, because I feel like there is a need out there for people to want to talk about their experiences with him. I'll only be on for a few more minutes, but in recap, I'm just very, very intrigued when signs hit you like a Mack truck. Like, why was there a $20 bill on the ATM floor? Why did I roll in just as someone was leaving the ATM, just having finished their transaction? I think it's because he called me to be in the right place at the right time. I'll be CCing this on my podcast, Alex Garrett Podcasting, as it's another successful wisdom talk. Thanks for joining me tonight, and do stay tuned for more, as we'll be doing more stuff at Join Wisdom. I guarantee that. God bless, and have a great Sunday night.